Hello, welcome back to Jack's FSX videos. Today, for the 17th episode of the ongoing series, I'm going to be telling you what all of the runway markings and lights mean on the runway, and before it and after and to the sides. Now, I'm just coming in to approach here, and you can just about see some lights on the left side of the runway. They're on almost every runway that has a commercial aircraft land at it, or even smaller ones. There are 4 lights. To make a perfect approach, you have to have 2 white and 2 red. So you've seen that I'm dipping down here, and now I've got 3 red and only 1 white. Now I've got 4, which means I am too low for approach. So I have to climb up again to get 2 red and 2 white. If I've got 4 white, it means I'm too high, or even 3 white. So now I've got 4 here, which means I'm too high for approach, which means I do need to get down a bit. So then again, if I've got 3 red, it does then mean that I'm still a bit too low, but it is okay to land at that. It's just if you've got 4 the same colour, that's when it's not good. But you can still make the landing, it's just highly unrecommended. So here I have 4, which because I landed way before the touchdown zone. Now I'm just going to show you the taxiway markings. They're extremely simple. Obviously you've got the yellow line in the middle, which is what your front gear has got to scale on. In this case, it has 2 front gear, this aircraft, the Piper, which means you just have to stay in the middle of that line. And then you've got your 2 on the either side, which means you can't go over that line. You must always stop at this 2 lines and 2 dotted lines before a runway, and request ATC to give you clearance for takeoff. So that's when you can then cross over. These massive white lines just here are the runway threshold. You're not allowed to land on them really. You have to land at least after them, and that's when you cut engines to idle. And you've got the runway markings, which I'll now explain. You've obviously got the number. So in this case it's runway 13, which means it's 130 degrees the runway positioned. Then you've got the white markings dotted all the way up the runway, which is the centre line where you've got to keep your front gear on, or like I said in this case, just get in the middle of it. And then you've got the 2 white lines on either side, which is what you've got to skate inside of. It's just to mark the edge of the concrete. Especially if it's dark, obviously. Then on smaller runways you just have these 2 massive white blocks on the runway, which are your landing touchdown zone. So that's where you have to touch down when landing. Okay, so now I'm going to explain the runway markings on a larger runway. So this is at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. Now these 3 strips here are basically the earliest that you can touch down, and also the countdown to sort of the main touchdown point, which is just literally ahead here, these 2 massive blocks. That's the recommended touchdown point, but you can land before that. Then these lines just coming up are also touchdown points, but once you get to the end one, and you haven't managed to touch down there, you have to go around. So you can touch down in these 2 marks here, and then these 1 marks, but it's not exactly recommended, especially for larger commercial jet aircrafts. This Piper could land on these 2 just coming up here, but even an aircraft that small has to go around if it misses those points. So now I'm just going to take off and look at the markings ahead, which are the exact same as the other side, because it depends what runway is the active runway that day. You'll also see arrows ahead, which are basically for taxiing down towards the runway. It's also line up. You can take off on those points, but you cannot land on those arrows. Next I'm going to explain the runway lighting at night for a smaller runway. You can see ahead you've got the normal lights on the left for your altitude, whether you're too high or too low, like I explained at the beginning of this episode. Then you've got flashing lights on either side of the runway, which are basically directing you to the start of the runway and where it is. And then you've got lights leading up to it. So when the lights obviously stop, that's when the start of the runway is, and it's just to basically lead you up. Then you've got green lights, which is just before the threshold, which means you've got to land just a little bit after those green lights. And in smaller airports, you can see a green light on the far side of the runway, more towards the terminal, which is just directing you that this is an airport here, in case you're in in distress or something. So as we get closer, you can just see those green lights more. Then you've got all of the white lights, which mark the edge of the runway, so you can't go over that. And then the red lights are at the end again, which show the end of the runway. And you can see there the 4 red lights on either side, which mark the end of the runway that you cannot cross over. Now this is a much larger aircraft at Gatwick. In the Piper again, you've got the white lights just in front, which mark the beginning of the countdown towards the runway. Then you've got a white light right in the middle going all the way up to mark the centre. Then these other red lights leading up towards the threshold, 3 lights on either side. Then you've got a green strip of lights which mark the beginning of the threshold, which you can just see there. Also, you can see green taxiway lights which mark the centre of the taxiways, and blue ones which mark the edge of the taxiway. And finally, I'm going to show you the landing lights for the runway. So they're a lot different to the last airport, as it's much busier and lands commercial jets. So it hasn't got the flashing light going down. Instead, it's got steady lights leading up to the runway and the threshold, much brighter as well. So you've got one strip going right down to the threshold with 2 other strips outwards, and then you've got the red lights as you get towards the runway, indicating towards the threshold. But you've also got 2 just red strips which mark the actual start of the runway, so you can land there in an emergency. Then you've got another 2 white strips in the middle of the runway, which also just to show down the runway, and they also actually light up as you go past. Now I'm just going to show you other parts of a runway that I didn't tell you about in the video. In the top image on the left, they're massive sort of yellow arrows pointing down towards the runway. This is an emergency touchdown zone, but you can taxi on it, but it's just not advisable. So it's only for emergencies. If you need an extra bit of runway to land on, it's just for safety really, as the tarmac isn't as strong. So if it's always being touched down on, it will eventually just wear out and no one will be able to land on it. Then still on the top image, you've got the arrows that I also said about, which lead up to the runway, which you can use for takeoff but not for touchdown. and again the threshold, the 8 white strips just at the end of that image. Then you've also got the image below, which is a taxiway actually going onto it, so you can't actually land on the taxiway. All the arrows, you've got to be past that threshold again, but this often happens in some airports, where as soon as you turn on the taxiway, you're on practically onto the runway, but you're just not allowed to take off or land on that section. Thanks for watching this episode 17, Runway Markings and Lights, the meaning of them. Next time for episode 18 is the trip into the Grand Canyon, so just flying around the Grand Canyon. Thanks for watching.